The door hit the marble frame so hard the sound bounced off every building on the block. And Selim didn't move. Rain was already falling, the kind that comes down in sheets, the kind that soaks through a shirt in under a minute. The penthouse lobby lights cut across the wet pavement like a blade. Phones were out. At least 11 of them. Held up. Recording. Every single second. Ravian Cade stood in the open doorway, jaw tight, eyes burning with something past anger. Get out. 2 words. That was all. Selim opened his mouth. Nothing came out. It never did. His voice had been gone since he was 7 years old, and not a single doctor had ever explained why. He pressed 2 fingers to his throat, the old habit, hoping this time would be different. It wasn't. Seraphine was already moving. She slid past Ravian with her tablet held high, the screen angled outward so every camera in that crowd could catch it. The document on the display was clean, official looking. Stamped with Selim's name across the top in bold letters above a chain of financial transactions that didn't belong to him. He's been feeding account information to your competitors for 8 months, she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, like a woman reading a grocery list. I pulled it all this afternoon. Ravian didn't look at the tablet again. He'd already seen it, already decided. The crowd pressed closer. Someone in the back whispered something Selim couldn't make out, but the tone was sharp, judgmental. He could feel it landing on his skin like the rain. Nerio appeared in the doorway behind Ravian. Small frame, wide brown eyes, wearing the oversized sleep shirt he always wore to bed. 6 years old and smart enough to understand that something was breaking. He didn't cry yet. He just stood there with both hands gripping the door frame, watching Selim the way a child watches a fire, terrified and unable to look away. Selim reached into his jacket pocket for his notepad. His hand was shaking. He wrote fast. That document isn't mine. He held it up. Ravian looked at the notepad for exactly 1 second, then looked away. That 1 second told Selim everything. The decision was already made before tonight, before the rain, before the crowd, before Seraphine walked in with her tablet. Whatever this was, it had been planned for a specific outcome, and that outcome was standing on wet pavement in the middle of the night with nowhere to go. Selim lowered the notepad slowly. He looked at the tablet in Seraphine's hand. She was still holding it up, still angled for the cameras. But Selim wasn't looking at the document anymore. He was looking at the timestamp, the small gray numbers in the bottom right corner of the screen. 11:47 p.m. He glanced up at the clock above the lobby entrance. 10:47 p.m. He blinked, looked again. The timestamp on Seraphine's document was 1 full hour ahead of the actual time. His chest went cold. Not from the rain. The document hadn't been pulled this afternoon. It had been created. And whoever created it had made one small, irreversible mistake. They had set the file timestamp to match a future hour, probably to simulate when it would be discovered. And the system clock had captured the actual creation time underneath it. Selim understood in that moment that this was not a betrayal. This was a construction. Every element of tonight, the rain, the crowd, the phones, Seraphine's calm voice, Ravian's certainty, had been assembled like a stage. He wasn't being accused. He was being placed. He tried again, reached for his notepad. His fingers found the pen. He wrote 4 words and held it up toward Ravian with everything he had left. Look at the timestamp. Ravian didn't look. One of the security guards stepped forward and took Selim's arm, not roughly but firmly, and walked him the rest of the way down the front steps to the curb. The rain came down harder. The lobby doors closed. Nerio's face disappeared behind the glass. Selim stood on the sidewalk with his notepad pressed against his chest, and the streetlight throwing a long shadow behind him across the wet asphalt. The crowd was already dispersing. Phones going down. The moment already becoming something people would talk about tomorrow. He didn't move, because something on the far side of the street had caught his attention. A car. Black, parked directly across from the penthouse with its headlights cutting through the rain. The driver's door opened, then the passenger door, then the rear door. 3 men stepped out. Same height, same build, same face. Hi viewers. Have you ever seen someone stay completely silent when they had every reason to break down? Drop a yes or a no in the comments right now. They stood at the edge of the street, watching, not moving, not recording, just standing in the rain like they had been there the whole time, like they had been waiting. And the one in the front, the one whose eyes landed directly on Selim's through the downpour, wasn't surprised. He was patient. Selim's grip tightened on the notepad. 3 identical men in the rain at midnight was strange enough. But the thing that stopped Selim's breathing entirely was what the man in front held in his right hand. A tablet, displaying the exact same document Seraphine had just shown the crowd. With one difference. The timestamp matched. Kedrick Virith walked across that street like the rain wasn't happening. No hood, no umbrella, suit jacket open at the collar. He moved with the kind of steadiness that doesn't come from confidence. Comes from certainty. The difference matters. Confident men rush. Certain men don't. He stopped 2 feet from Selim. Up close, the resemblance to the other 2 was exact in bone structure and height, but the eyes were different. Where the other 2 watched from the curb with measured caution, Kedrick's focus was specific. Like a man examining a key he'd been told would fit a particular lock. He looked at Selim for a long moment. Then he spoke. Did you notice the timestamp? Selim went completely still. Not the question he expected. Not are you okay? Or where will you go or what just happened in there? Not any of the things a stranger asks a person standing alone in the rain outside a building they just got thrown out of. He asked about the timestamp. Selim's pen was already moving before he realized it. He wrote, "You saw it." He turned the notepad. Kedrick read it. Nodded once. "We've been watching this building for 3 weeks," he said. Tonight was the intended execution point. Behind him, the 2 others crossed the street slowly. The one on the left had the same build but carried himself differently, shoulders back, eyes scanning the perimeter in systematic sweeps, the way a man does when he's been trained to watch exits. The one on the right moved more quietly, hands in his pockets, attention fixed on his phone. Kedrick didn't introduce them. Not yet. He shrugged off his jacket in one motion and placed it around Selim's shoulders without asking. It was a practical move, not a dramatic one. The rain was coming sideways now and Selim's shirt was soaked through. Selim wrote, "How did you know about the timestamp?" Kedrick's jaw shifted slightly. Because the same document showed up in 3 other locations over the past 2 months. Each time, the file carried a future timestamp. Each time, an Omega was removed from a key position inside a syndicate household. He paused. Tonight was the 4th. Selim stared at him. He wrote, "Why me?" "That's the question," Kedrick said quietly. A sound cut through the rain. Small feet on wet pavement. Selim turned. Nerio had come out through the side service entrance, the one that opened from the stairwell, the one the security team never bothered to watch because no one important ever used it. He was still in his sleep shirt, shoes untied, sprinting across the wet sidewalk with both arms already extended. He slammed into Selim's side and wrapped both arms around his waist and didn't say a word. Selim's hand came down on the back of the boy's head automatically. Steady. Holding him in place. The crowd that had lingered on the edge of the block began murmuring again. Phones came back up. Kedrick looked at the boy. Something moved across his face briefly. Not sentiment, more like confirmation of something he had already calculated. "He followed you out," he said. Selim nodded. The one on the right, the quiet one, had stopped scrolling his phone and was watching Nerio with an unreadable expression. The one on the left finally spoke. His voice was lower than Kedrick's, edged. "We need to move. This street has already been documented. Staying extends the exposure." Kedrick didn't argue. He looked at Selim directly. "You have 2 choices. You go back in there and you wait for round 2 of whatever Seraphine has planned. Or you come with us and we show you the rest of the picture. Selim looked down at Nerio, then back at Kedrick. He wrote one word. Evidence? Kedrick held up the tablet. 47 files. All time-stamped. All traceable. Selim reached down and took Nerio's hand. The boy looked up at him. Eyes still wet, jaw set in that particular way 6-year-olds set their jaws when they've decided something. They walked toward the car. Kedrick fell into step beside them. He said nothing for almost half a block. Then, quietly, not loudly, not for the cameras, just for Selim, he spoke again. You weren't the target tonight. Selim's stride slowed. He wrote without stopping. Then who was? Kedrick's eyes moved toward the penthouse building, toward the lit windows on the top floor where Ravian's silhouette was visible against the glass, standing completely still, watching the street below. Someone needed Ravian to exile you publicly, Kedrick said. He opened the rear car door. They needed witnesses. They needed his emotional reaction on record. They needed him discredited before he could ask questions. He let that land. Which means whoever built this frame wasn't afraid of you, Selim. He looked at him steadily. They were afraid of what Ravian might figure out. If you stayed. The Virith estate sat at the end of a private road that most maps didn't show. Cold marble floors. Ceilings high enough to make every sound travel differently. The kind of house that was built not to impress visitors but to contain operations. Wide corridors, reinforced interior doors, rooms that served specific functions and nothing else. No decoration for decoration's sake. Every object in the space had a purpose. Selim noticed all of it the moment he walked in. He noticed the security panel behind the coat rack, the secondary lock on the library door, the fact that the kitchen faced the front gate and the study faced the back wall. Whoever designed this estate had designed it the way a chess player designs an opening. Every position controlled, every angle covered. Nerio held his hand and looked up at everything with wide eyes. A woman appeared from the corridor, staff, by the look of her, efficient and quiet, and guided Nerio toward a warm room with dry clothes and something to eat. The boy looked back at Selim twice before the door closed. Selim held up 4 fingers. Their code. It meant, I'm still here. Nerio held up 4 fingers back. Then the door closed. The 3 brothers moved through the main hall without speaking to each other, but with a fluency that came from years of operating in shared space. Kedrick sat at the head of the large center table. The quiet one, Velis, Selim would learn, opened a laptop and began pulling files without being asked. The one with the scanning eyes, Torin, stood at the window facing the road. Kedrick looked at Selim. We've been tracking a manipulation network that's been working inside for major syndicates along the East Coast for the past 16 months, he said. They don't take money directly. They take position. He spread 4 folders across the table. Each one had a name and a photograph clipped to the front. Each time a key person was removed from a household, it cleared the way for a financial restructure inside that operation. Quietly, legally, Selim sat. He pulled the nearest folder toward him and opened it. He wrote, These are all Omegas. Every single one. He wrote, Why Omegas specifically? Torin answered from the window without turning. Because Omegas in bonded syndicate households hold informal access. Access that isn't logged. Not credentialed. Not trackable the same way an employee's access is. He paused. You can move money through a bonded household and it doesn't look like movement. It looks like household management. Selim stared at the folder. He thought about the 8 months Seraphine had claimed. The specific number. He thought about which accounts he had actually touched in 8 months. Grocery transfers, the boys' school fees, 2 contractor payments for repairs on the East Wing. Nothing that should have generated the kind of document Seraphine displayed. He wrote, She built it from real transactions. Kedrick nodded. She layered real activity underneath fabricated routing. If you looked quickly, it appeared credible. If you looked carefully, the timestamps break it, Velis said without looking up from the laptop. Every fabricated document in our database carries the same structural error. Future timestamp on the file metadata. Past timestamp on the visible display. The person building these files is using an automated tool that has a consistent clock calibration flaw. Selim wrote, "Same tool. Every time. Same operator," Kedrick said. The room held that for a moment. Then Velis straightened. He said one sentence. Flat. Measured. "There's a secondary encryption layer inside the files." Nobody moved. Kedrick looked across the table. "How deep?" "Deep enough that a surface scan wouldn't catch it." Velis turned the laptop screen outward. "I need time to open it cleanly. If I force it, it may wipe." Selim leaned forward, studying the file structure on the screen. He wrote a note and slid it toward Velis. "Try the modification date, not the creation date. The encryption key might be time-anchored." Velis looked at the note, then looked at Selim, then back at the note. He typed for 40 seconds. A new window opened. 5 names appeared on the screen in a clean list. Names Selim didn't recognize yet. Names attached to 5 different households across 3 cities. Torin had crossed the room without a sound and was reading over Velis's shoulder. "These are the next scheduled removals," Torin said quietly. Kedrick looked at the list. Then he looked at Selim. The 5 names sat on that screen like a countdown no one had known was running. 5 more people. 5 more households about to be dismantled. And the clock on all of them had already started. Selim didn't sleep. He sat at the side table in the library with a yellow legal pad and Velis's secondary laptop and worked through the night while the estate went quiet around him. This was how he had always processed things. Not by talking through them, that option had never been available to him, but by building a map. Start with one solid point. Connect it to the next. Follow the line until it either holds or breaks. The financial records Kedrick gave him access to were extensive. 47 files. Each one attached to a different syndicate household. Each one documenting a removal. An Omega accused of a financial crime, expelled, and then quietly replaced within the same household by someone with cleaner credentials and full operational access. Selim drew a column for each case on the legal pad and started filling them in. The transactions in each fabricated document shared a structural signature. They weren't random. They were built to mimic the kind of routine household transfers an Omega in a bonded position would realistically make. Grocery vendors, utility accounts, contractor services. Low enough amounts to pass a quick review. High enough in frequency to suggest a pattern. He wrote at the top of the page, "Not theft. Appearance of theft." Below that, "Designed for emotional reaction, not legal prosecution." He underlined the second line twice, because that was the piece that kept pulling at him. None of the accused Omegas in the 47 cases had been prosecuted. Not one. The accusations had served their purpose: expulsion, public humiliation, removal, and then disappeared. No formal charges. No court filings. Which meant the goal was never legal accountability. The goal was the reaction. Get the Alpha to expel the Omega publicly. Document the expulsion. Move in the replacement. Proceed. Around 3 in the morning, Velis appeared in the library doorway with 2 cups of coffee and set one within Selim's reach without saying anything. He sat down across the table and resumed his own work. They worked in silence for an hour. Then Selim slid a note across the table. The offshore routing structure in these transfers isn't random. It cycles through the same 3 shell companies in sequence. If you trace the sequence backward from the earliest case, you find the origin account. Velis read it, typed, waited. "The origin account is domestic," he said after a moment. "East Coast. Registered to a holding company called Meridian Shore Consultants." He paused. "Registered 18 months ago, 2 months before the first removal." Selim wrote, "Who owns it?" Velis was quiet for too long. "The registration is layered," he said. 3 proxy signatories. "But the IP address that filed the paperwork." He stopped. He looked at Selim. It traces back to a device registered inside Ravian's syndicate security team. Selim set his pen down. The room felt smaller. Not an outside operation using Seraphine as a contractor. An inside position. Someone already embedded in Ravian's organization who had either recruited Seraphine or built her cover story entirely from within. He picked up the pen again. He wrote, "How long has the device been active inside the syndicate?" Velis checked. 14 months. Selim wrote, "Before Seraphine arrived? 6 months before." He sat back. He thought about the timeline. Whoever was behind this had taken a position inside Ravian's security team more than a year before Seraphine walked into the penthouse with her tablet. That wasn't opportunistic. That was patient, careful. The kind of long-game thinking that doesn't get rattled because it doesn't need to rush. He pulled a clean sheet from the legal pad and started writing fast. The frame-up wasn't reactive. It was scheduled. Seraphine didn't discover evidence tonight. The document was built weeks ago. The timestamp error proves the creation date predates the alleged discovery by a significant margin. He slid the note to Velis. Velis read it slowly. Then he pulled up the metadata on the original file one more time, the file that had been displayed on Seraphine's tablet to the crowd outside the penthouse. He ran a creation date extraction. The result came back. Selim looked at the date. The document had been created 22 days ago. 22 days before tonight. Before any accusation. Before any scene. Before the rain and the crowd and the phones. Ravian hadn't made a decision based on evidence. He had been delivered to an emotional reaction that had already been scripted for him 3 weeks in advance. Velis said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "He never had a chance to think clearly." Selim looked at the date on the screen and felt something shift inside his chest that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite anger. It was something colder than both. Understanding. Ravian hadn't failed him because he didn't care. He had failed him because someone had engineered the exact conditions that would make a careful man stop being careful. And whoever did it knew Ravian well enough to know exactly which moment would break him. That wasn't strategy from a distance. That was knowledge from the inside. Nerio found Selim at the library table just after 7 in the morning. He didn't announce himself. He just appeared in the doorway with his shoes on the wrong feet and his hair still pressed flat on one side from sleep, and he stood there until Selim looked up. Then he walked in, climbed into the chair beside him, and placed both hands flat on the table like he was ready to work. Selim looked at him for a long moment. Then he pushed a clean sheet of paper toward the boy and set a pen beside it. Nerio picked up the pen and wrote, in the large, uneven letters of a 6-year-old who had been practicing, "I didn't want to stay there." Selim read it. He wrote back, "I know." Nerio wrote, "Did you eat?" Selim had not eaten. He pointed to the empty coffee cup and raised one eyebrow. Nerio gave him a look that was very specifically the look of someone who had heard that excuse before and did not accept it. He slid off the chair and disappeared down the hallway and came back 7 minutes later carrying a plate that one of the staff had clearly assembled for him. Toast, fruit, a folded napkin, with the focused expression of a person completing an important task. He set it in front of Selim, sat back down, crossed his arms. Selim ate. Nerio watched him eat with the particular satisfaction of someone who has solved a problem. Kedrick appeared in the doorway midway through. He didn't come in immediately. He stood at the threshold and observed the two of them, the mute Omega working through a plate of toast and a 6-year-old with his arms crossed like a security detail, and something in his posture changed. Slight, almost invisible. He came in and sat down across from Selim. "The boy refused breakfast until someone told him where you were," he said. "Not judgment. Information." Selim looked at Nerio. Nerio shrugged one shoulder the way children do when they've been caught doing something they would absolutely do again. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Selim back at his notes, Nerio drawing on his clean sheet of paper with full commitment, Kedrick reviewing documents on his own tablet. Then Nerio put down his pen. He wrote, carefully, in his large letters, "Does Daddy hate Selim now?" The room shifted. Kedrick looked up from his tablet. Selim set his pen down. He reached over and took the boy's paper, and he thought for a moment, not about what would be comforting, but about what was true. He thought about the rain and the closed door and the 1 second Ravian had looked at the notepad before looking away. He wrote, "No." He believed the wrong story. Nerio read it. He wrote back, "Why did he believe it?" Selim looked at the question for a while. He wrote, "Because someone told it to him at exactly the right moment." When people are scared or angry, the wrong story can sound like the only story. Nerio stared at that for a long time. His brow was furrowed the way children's brows furrow when they're working through something that doesn't quite fit inside the understanding they already have. He wrote one more line. "That's not fair." Selim wrote, "No, it's not." He folded the paper and kept it. Kedrick had gone back to his tablet, but his attention hadn't fully returned to it. He was listening. The kind of listening people do when they're deciding something. Torin appeared in the doorway with his phone in his hand. "Ravians started making calls," he said. Kedrick looked up. "Syndicate security line. Private channel. He's not reaching out to Elias." Torin looked at the phone screen. "He's running his own audit." Selim sat forward. Kedrick looked at him. "He doesn't know what he's looking for yet. But he's looking." Selim wrote quickly, "He'll find the shell company. If he looks at the routing on the offshore transfers, the sequence leads back to Meridian Shore. He'll find it." Kedrick read the note. Then he looked at Torin. A beat passed between the brothers, the particular communication of people who have spent their entire lives in the same operational space. Torin said quietly, "He found it." Nobody moved. Nerio looked between the adults. He couldn't follow everything, but he could read the temperature of a room the way all children who have grown up around tension learn to do. He moved his chair closer to Selim's. Selim kept his hand steady on the table, because on the far side of the city, in a penthouse still marked by last night's scene, Ravian Cade had just pulled up a financial routing record and found a shell company name he didn't recognize attached to a transaction he didn't authorize. And the name on the registration paperwork was not Selim's. It was Seraphine's. The night Selim had spent building a map from the outside, Ravian was now building the same map from the inside. And both maps were about to point to the same address. The rumor hit 3 syndicates before sunrise. By 6 in the morning it had a shape. By 8 it had details. By 10 it had names, and one of those names was Selim's. The story moving through private channels was simple the way effective lies are always simple. Ravian Cade had discovered a spy in his household. A mute Omega with access to financial accounts. He had removed the threat. And the Virith family, the 3 Alpha Kings from the north side, had taken the spy in. That was the version circulating. Not the truth. The constructed version. And it was working exactly the way someone had planned it to work. Kedrick sat at the head of the main table that morning with printed transcripts in front of him, pulled from monitored syndicate communication channels, and read through them without visible reaction. Torin stood at the window again. Valus was already on his 2nd cup of coffee and his 3rd analysis window. Selim sat across from Kedrick and watched him read. He wrote, "They're pushing both sides toward the same conclusion." Kedrick looked up. Selim wrote, "If Ravian believes the Virith family sheltered a spy, he has cause to move against you. If your allies believe you protected someone who betrayed Ravian, your credibility breaks down. Either way, the attention shifts off Seraphine." Kedrick set the transcripts down. "That's exactly right." Torin turned from the window. 3 of our allied families have already reached out asking for a statement. 2 of Ravian's lieutenants sent messages flagged as urgent. "Don't answer them," Kedrick said. Torin's jaw tightened. "If we go silent, then the rumor grows." Kedrick's voice was level. "Let it. A rumor with no confirmation and no denial keeps moving in circles. It doesn't land anywhere." He looked at the transcripts. But the moment we respond, we give it a direction. And whoever built this is waiting for us to pick one. Velas spoke without looking up. The Federal Financial Monitoring System flagged 3 of Ravian's shipping accounts this morning. Automated compliance alert. It looks routine. He paused. It isn't. Selim looked at him sharply. Velas turned the screen. The alert was triggered by a report filed through a financial crimes tip line. Anonymous submission. Filed at 4:52 this morning. He looked at Kedrick. An hour after Ravian started his own internal audit. The room went quiet. That matters. Someone had been watching Ravian's internal network in real time. The moment his audit touched the right account, a pre-written complaint had been filed externally. Automated. Instant. Designed to put federal eyes on his operation before he could fully understand what he'd found. Selim was already writing. He slid the note to Kedrick. Seraphine is not the architect. She's the trigger. Someone else is watching the board and making moves in response to Ravian's actions in real time. That requires either direct access to his internal systems or someone physically inside his operation. Kedrick read it twice. He looked up at Torin. The device Velas traced last night, he said. The one that registered the shell company. Is it still active? Velas checked. Nodded. Pull the location. Velas typed. Waited. The cursor blinked 3 times. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at Kedrick. It's in the building right now, he said. Not outside. Not across the city. Inside Ravian's penthouse. Kedrick stood. Seraphine is still in that building, Torin said quietly. Nobody needed to say the rest. Because across the city, Ravian Cade had found a shell company name. He was pulling the thread. He was moving through his own financial records with the focused anger of a man who had started to realize he'd been used. And the woman who had used him was standing somewhere in the same building, watching him find it. The pattern had a shape. Selim had been staring at it for 2 hours before it fully resolved. The way certain images only become clear once you stop trying to force them into focus. He had the 47 case files spread across the library table. Not randomly. He had arranged them in the order they happened, left to right, earliest to most recent. Then he had drawn one line connecting each expelled Omega to the household they had been removed from. Then a second line connecting each household to the infrastructure it controlled. Ports, transport routes, cold storage warehouses along the eastern seaboard, 3 private banking relationships, 1 federal licensed freight brokerage. He put his pen down and looked at what he'd drawn. This wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about acquiring something. Kedrick came in and stopped at the edge of the table. He looked at the map for a long moment without speaking. Then he pulled a chair and sat. Selim wrote, "She's not destroying these households. She's restructuring them. Every removal creates a vacancy. Every vacancy gets filled with someone she controls. After enough of those placements, she has access running through the entire network. Legitimate access. Documented. Clean." Kedrick read it. He was quiet. Selim wrote, "It's not sabotage. It's an acquisition strategy." Kedrick looked at the map. "And because it moves through bonded households instead of corporate structures, it doesn't trigger the same oversight." He paused. "No merger filings. No regulatory review. It just looks like staff changes inside private families. That is important. Pause on that. Not a gang takeover. Not a territorial war. Something cleaner. Something that would survive legal scrutiny because it was structured to look like nothing at all." Velas appeared in the doorway. He had a name. Not a shell company name. A real name. Person. He set a single printed page on the table in front of Kedrick. Meridian Shore Consultants traces back through 4 proxy layers to a holding company registered in Delaware. He tapped the bottom of the page. "That company has 1 real officer of record." Kedrick looked at the name. His expression didn't change, but his stillness changed. The kind of stillness that comes when something confirms a theory a person hoped was wrong. Selim reached across and turned the page toward himself. He read the name, Deshara Niles. He wrote, "Who is she?" Torin answered from the hallway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. She ran logistics for 3 East Coast syndicates simultaneously for about 6 years, he said. Then she disappeared. 18 months ago, she stopped showing up anywhere. No arrests, no departure records, nothing. He looked at the page. We assumed she had retired. Kedrick said, "She didn't retire. Velis. She went quiet to build this." Selim looked at the map on the table. 47 cases. 16 months of coordinated removals. 5 names still scheduled. Federal investigators now circling Ravian's shipping accounts. And one woman running it all from a position so carefully constructed that she had remained invisible until a 6-year-old boy's caretaker noticed a timestamp error on a rainy night outside a penthouse building. He wrote, "She's still moving. The 5 names on the list, how much time do they have?" Velis looked at his laptop. Based on the operational cadence between previous cases, the next removal is approximately 9 days out. Selim circled one name on his legal pad. He slid it to Kedrick. It was the name of a bonded Omega inside the largest freight brokerage on the eastern seaboard. If that position fell, Deshara Niles would control the routing certification for 2/3 of commercial sea freight entering the northeastern United States. Not loudly, not visibly, just completely. Kedrick looked at the circled name for a long time. Then he looked at Selim. "We need to bring this to the council," he said. The private syndicate council. Every major family at one table. The kind of meeting where information either stopped a war or started one, depending entirely on how it was delivered. Selim wrote, "Seraphine will be there." "Yes," Kedrick said. He wrote, "She'll expect you to accuse Ravian. Or defend me. Either move hands her the room." Kedrick looked at him steadily. "Then we don't make either move." He turned the printed page over and slid it back to Selim. "You're going to present the evidence yourself." Selim looked at the page, then at Kedrick. He hadn't been in a room full of syndicate leaders in his life. He couldn't speak. He had a legal pad, a pen, and 47 case files. He wrote one word back. "When?" The council room had no windows. That was the first thing Selim noticed when they walked in, the deliberate absence of outside light. Every light source was internal. Every wall was solid. The table seated 18 and every seat was occupied by the time the Virith brothers entered with Selim positioned between Torin and Velis, 3 steps behind Kedrick. The room noticed them immediately. Not loudly. A shift in posture. Eyes moving. The particular temperature change that happens when something unexpected enters a space that was designed for expected things. Ravian Cade was already seated at the far end of the table. He looked at Selim. Selim looked at him. Neither moved. Seraphine was 3 seats to Ravian's left in a dark fitted jacket. Hands clasped on the table, expression composed. She tracked Kedrick's entrance with a neutrality so practiced it looked natural. She hadn't expected Selim in this room. That was clear in the half-second delay before her composure reassembled. That half-second. That was everything. The council leader, an older man named Azel Marchbanks, the kind of man whose silence carried more authority than most people's full speeches, looked at Kedrick. "You requested this meeting," he said. "The floor is yours." Kedrick didn't speak immediately. He stepped to the side. And he gestured toward Selim. Murmuring moved through the room like a wave. Someone at the far end said something in a low voice. 2 others shifted in their chairs. A mute Omega standing at the front of a syndicate council meeting was not a thing that had happened before at this table. Selim set his legal pad on the table. He picked up the remote for the room's display screen. He looked at Seraphine once. Not long, not dramatically, just long enough to be clear that this was intentional, and then he clicked the first slide. 47 documents. Each one time-stamped. Each one showing the structural metadata error. future timestamp on file creation, past timestamp on visible display. The same error. 47 times. Undeniable pattern. He advanced to the next slide. Financial routing maps. Offshore shell company sequence. 3 proxy layers resolving to Meridian Shore Consultants. Next slide. Meridian Shore tracing to a Delaware holding company. The holding company's single officer of record. Deshara Niles. The room went completely still. Not the polite silence of people waiting. The hard silence of people processing something they had not been prepared to process. Azelle Marchbanks leaned forward. Seraphine had not moved. She had not spoken. But the composed neutrality was different now. It had a rigidity to it, the quality of something being held in place rather than resting naturally. Ravian's jaw had tightened. He was looking at the routing maps on the screen with the expression of a man watching a building he thought he owned get mapped from the outside. Then one of the council members, a woman named Brialyn Osei, who ran transportation contracts in the Mid-Atlantic, said, "The 5 names on the secondary list. Are those households represented at this table?" Silence. 3 people looked down. Seraphine finally spoke. Her voice was steady, precise. She looked at Kedrick, not at the screen. "This is a remarkable presentation from a family with significant motivation to redirect attention away from their decision to shelter someone already accused of financial." The document used in that accusation was created 22 days before the accusation was made. Selim had written it in large letters on a separate sheet and held it up before she finished her sentence. The room looked at the sheet. He turned it toward the screen and clicked to the metadata extraction. Creation date. File signature. 22 days before the night in the rain. Seraphine's sentence ended without its landing. She looked at the screen. Then she looked at Selim. And for the first time, the composure didn't reassemble. Ravian was standing now. He wasn't looking at Seraphine. He was looking at the screen. At the document with his name attached to it, the one that had ended everything, displayed next to its creation date 3 weeks before any of it happened. Azelle Marchbanks looked slowly around the table. Then at Seraphine. "You will remain in this building," he said. Not loudly, just finally. 2 men moved to stand behind her chair. She didn't run. She sat very still. And Selim lowered the sheet of paper. His hand was steady. Seraphine's accounts were frozen by noon. By 2 in the afternoon, federal analysts had cross-referenced the Meridian Shore filing with 3 open investigations and found connections they hadn't known to look for. The consortium Deshara Niles had constructed across 16 months, the placements, the shell layers, the timed removals, collapsed the way carefully stacked structures collapse. All at once, and quietly. No dramatic arrests on street corners. No press conferences. The kind of takedown that happens in offices and on phones and in rooms where people speak in measured sentences and sign documents with steady hands. Within 48 hours, the 5 scheduled removals were stopped. The Omegas whose names had appeared on that encrypted list received private notifications through channels they didn't know had been watching out for them. Deshara Niles was located through the device Valus had tracked. She had been operating from a private office registered under a consulting firm 11 blocks from Ravian's penthouse. She had never needed to be far away. The closer you are to the fire, the better you can control the heat. Seraphine cooperated. Not out of loyalty to anyone. She had none, but because cooperation offered a reduced outcome and she was, above everything else, a practical woman. She confirmed the timeline. She confirmed the document fabrication. She confirmed the recruitment of the security team member who had provided internal access to Ravian's operation. Everything Selim had mapped on that legal pad over 1 sleepless night was confirmed, point by point. Everything. Ravian received the confirmation on a Thursday morning. He sat with it for 6 hours. Then he drove to the Virith estate alone. No security. No advance call. He pulled up to the front gate in a black car and sat with the engine running, both hands on the wheel, for almost 4 minutes before he pressed the call button. Kedrick answered. Ravian said, "I need to speak to Selim." A long pause. He knows you're here, Kedrick said. Another pause. Does he want to see me? The gate mechanism clicked, then stopped. It didn't open. Ravian sat with that for a moment. Then he pressed the button again. Kedrick's voice came back. He's not refusing, he said carefully. He needs time. Ravian looked at the gate. How much time? No answer came. He sat there for another 10 minutes. Then he turned the car around and drove back the way he came. Inside the estate, Nerio had watched from the upstairs window. He had seen his father's car, had recognized it immediately. The specific black sedan, the specific way Ravian always parked with the front wheels turned slightly left. He came downstairs and found Selim in the library. He wrote on his paper he came. Selim looked at the words for a while. He wrote back, I know. Nerio wrote, Are you going to talk to him? Selim set his pen down. He looked out the window at the empty driveway, at the tire marks still pressed into the gravel from where Ravian had idled. He wrote, Not yet. Nerio looked at the word yet for a long time, in the way children look at words when they're deciding how much weight to give them. He wrote, Okay, just that. Okay. He folded his paper and put it in his pocket and went back to whatever he had been doing, with the particular grace of a child who has learned to trust a process he doesn't fully understand. Kedrick found Selim still at the window an hour later. He didn't ask questions. He sat. He said nothing. After a while, Selim picked up his pen. He wrote, How do you trust something again after it breaks in public? Kedrick looked at the question. He didn't answer right away. When he did, he said, You don't trust the same thing. Because the same thing doesn't exist anymore. He paused. You decide whether the new version is worth the risk. Selim looked at that. He didn't write anything back. But he stopped looking at the driveway. 3 days later, Ravian came again. This time, the gate opened. But when the staff member went to inform Selim, they came back with a message written on a folded square of paper. She handed it to Kedrick. He read it. He walked to the front gate where Ravian was standing with his hands in his pockets in the gray afternoon light. He handed Ravian the note. Ravian unfolded it. One line, in Selim's handwriting. I'm not ready, but I'm not gone. Ravian stood at that gate for a long time with the note in his hand. Then Nerio walked out through the front door. Alone, shoes on the right feet this time, jacket buttoned, and crossed the gravel driveway and stopped in front of his father. Ravian looked at the boy. Nerio looked at him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Nerio reached out and took his father's hand. And they stood there together at the open gate. Not inside. Not yet. Just there. For months later, the street was quiet. The kind of quiet that belongs to neighborhoods where children play outside and nobody locks their car in the driveway, and the biggest noise at any given moment is a bicycle wheel on concrete. Selim sat on the front porch steps of a small house. Rented, not bought, because some decisions needed to be reversible, with a cup of coffee cooling beside him and a stack of papers on his knee that had nothing to do with financial forensics or shell companies or encrypted files. They were school drawings. Nerio's. One was a house with a large sun. One was a car with 6 wheels because 6-year-olds don't always count. One was 3 figures standing next to each other. A tall one, a medium one, and a small one, with the names written underneath in block letters. Selim, Kedrick, Nerio. Selim looked at that one for a while. He heard footsteps on the path before he saw the figure. Steady, unhurried. The walk of someone who had rehearsed nothing and decided to come anyway. Ravian. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked older than 4 months should make a person look. Not worn out, more like stripped down. The things that had been surface on him before were gone, and what remained was just the actual man underneath. He said, I won't stay long. Selim gestured to the step beside him. Ravian sat. For a moment neither of them did anything. The street was empty. A bird moved through the tree at the edge of the yard. Somewhere down the block, Nerio's bicycle wheels made their particular sound on the sidewalk. That small clicking rhythm that Selim had learned to track from 3 houses away. Ravian had brought a small notebook. He opened it. He had written his words in advance, which was something Selim understood more than most people would. He read from it, not dramatically, just reading. I didn't ask for proof because I was convinced. I asked for proof because I was afraid. And I chose the version of the story that let me act on the fear instead of questioning it. He paused. That's not something I can explain away. I know that. He closed the notebook. I'm not asking you to undo what happened. I'm asking if there is anything left. Selim had thought about this moment. He had thought about it on the nights when the library at the Virith estate was too quiet, and on the mornings when Nerio asked questions Selim didn't have clean answers for, and on the afternoon he had watched Ravian stand at that open gate holding a folded note with one line on it. He reached for his own notepad. He wrote slowly. Not because he was uncertain, because he wanted the words exact. He turned the page toward Ravian and let him read. Trust doesn't break loudly. Everyone thinks it does. But it doesn't. It breaks quietly. In the moment you look at someone and realize they chose the story that was handed to them over the person standing right in front of them. Ravian read it. He didn't look away from the page. Selim wrote the next part underneath. You didn't lose me the night you told me to get out. He let Ravian read that. Then he wrote the last line. You lost the version of me who believed you would never doubt me. Ravian sat with those words for a long time. The street stayed quiet. Down the block, the clicking of bicycle wheels slowed, then stopped, then turned around and started back toward the house. That particular sound of a child who has decided it's time to come home. Selim folded the notepad page once and held it out. Ravian took it. He held it with both hands the way people hold things they know they'll keep. He didn't say anything else. He stood. He looked at Selim one more time. Not with the burning certainty of the man in the penthouse doorway. Not with the weight of the man at the gate. Just looking. Clearly. The way you look at something real. Then he walked back down the path. The gate at the end of the front yard was open. He passed through it. And Selim sat on the steps with his coffee and his stack of drawings as Nerio came around the corner on the bicycle. 6 wheels on paper, 2 wheels in real life. And rode past the open gate and up the path and stopped at the bottom of the steps. He looked at Selim. Selim held up the drawing with the 3 figures. Nerio looked at it. Then he grinned, the full, unreserved grin of a child who has decided that today is a good day, and leaned the bicycle against the porch railing and climbed the steps and sat down beside Selim in the afternoon light. No words, no questions, just the 2 of them, and the quiet street, and everything that had survived. If the story moved you, if you've ever stayed silent when you deserve to be heard, or if you've ever had to rebuild after someone chose doubt over trust, drop your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story on this channel. Every story here is built for the person who needs it most, and that might be someone in your circle right now. Share this. You never know who it reaches.